You're under arrest for excessive lawn growth. The man barked through a bullhorn at 6:42 in the morning, standing at the end of my gravel driveway with his partner, both dressed in navy blue shirts too stiff to be real, both holding clipboards and cheap badges you could order online. I didn't drop my coffee. I didn't even blink. I just stood there barefoot in my flannel pajama bottoms, watching them from the kitchen window, sipping like it was a casual Sunday. Which, technically, it was, until the two fake cops cut the padlock on my front gate and stepped onto my property. I should have been scared. Instead, I smiled. Because 20 years ago, I trained real men to breach cartel compounds without being seen. And these two clowns couldn't even properly match their socks. The taller one, the mouthy type with a patchy goatee and an HOA patrol sticker peeling off his chest, strutted up the path like he owned the place. The second guy kept fumbling with a GoPro strapped to his shoulder, trying to look official. I'd seen that model before. Used it on night raids in Kandahar. They were filming this. Probably for the HOA board, or some low-budget legal stunt. I walked to the front room and tilted the blinds with 2 fingers, watching them reach the porch. The bullhorn guy knocked twice, then shouted, "You are in violation of subsection 7A, visual noncompliance. Present yourself immediately, or force will be used." I leaned against the wall, took another sip, and calmly said to myself, "Force, huh?" My old badge sat on the shelf next to the window, right beside my retirement plaque and the broken sidearm I'd kept after the warehouse raid in '09. I wasn't sure yet if they were just HOA thugs playing dress-up or actual idiots willing to commit felony trespass in broad daylight. But I wasn't in the mood for guessing games. I slid my phone from the counter and dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. Deputy Morales answered after the first ring. "Yeah?" he said, half asleep. "They're here," I said. "2 of them. Fake uniforms. Breaking and entering." Morales grunted. "Want me to roll a unit?" I smirked. "Give me 20 minutes. Then send someone with handcuffs." Morales didn't even argue. He knew the tone. He used to call it my classroom voice back when I ran SWAT drills for the county. I put the phone down and walked to the hallway closet. My hands moved out of habit. Old instincts. Training grooves carved deep into the muscles. I changed out of the flannel and into worn tactical pants and a fitted black t-shirt. Not for intimidation, just comfort. I didn't need body armor. I wasn't planning to get touched. As I tied my boots, the front door rattled. Then a loud clang. They were using a crowbar. They actually brought tools. That, more than anything, told me they weren't just posturing. They were trying to make a citizen's arrest, maybe even expecting me to run. I walked calmly to the old utility panel in the hallway and flipped a switch. A small buzz clicked through the vents. My wife had always hated that I kept the fog system wired into the ceiling. Said it made us look like we were planning a haunted house. But I'd left it for a reason. The door burst open as I stepped back into the living room. Fog hissed out from the ceiling in a low cloud. It wasn't blinding, just disorienting, enough to make them hesitate. The first man shouted, "Come out now! This is HOA enforcement protocol." I stepped forward through the mist, holding nothing but a stainless steel spatula from breakfast prep. The sight of me, balding, middle-aged, barefoot and calm, must have thrown them off. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You've just violated Section 12A of the Felony Stupidity Code. How do you plead?" Goatee lunged. That was mistake number 2. His boot hit the slick mat I'd planted just behind the welcome rug, and both men went down in a mess of limbs and surprise. Before they could recover, 2 zip cuff coils hidden inside the mat deployed, one wrapping around their ankles and the other coiling the taller guy's wrists when he instinctively tried to push up. I stepped over them, leaned down, and said, "You're not very good at this." The second man whimpered, "You can't do this. We're sanctioned officers." I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a laminated HOA guideline sheet. I'd printed it last week after they sent a warning about my mailbox being a half-inch taller than standard. "This says you can issue fines, not arrest homeowners. Especially not with plastic badges and unregistered weapons. His eyes widened. I nodded. Oh yeah? I saw the holster. Too bad it's empty. The taller guy grunted and rolled onto his back. The president said you'd resist. I raised an eyebrow. Did he also say I spent a decade breaching drug dens and dragging out armed fugitives by their shoelaces? He blinked. The GoPro beeped once and went silent. Probably battery failure. Or remote kill. Either way, their evidence was gone. I heard tires on gravel outside. I moved to the window and spotted a third man standing near the gate, holding bolt cutters, pacing like a lookout. This one was younger, heavier, and not in uniform. Just jeans, a baseball cap, and a Bluetooth earpiece. He was mumbling into it, eyes darting up toward the house. He looked nervous. I clicked the front door shut behind me and quietly locked it, trapping the two invaders inside my home. One of them screamed and started kicking. I ignored it. Morales would be here soon. I walked toward the gate with a limp I only faked now, like I used to when approaching hostile suspects pretending to be harmless. The third man looked up just in time to see me lean against the porch rail. He froze. I gave him a half-wave. Nice cutters, I said. You planning to trim hedges or felony evidence? He took a step back. I don't want trouble, man. I nodded. You're about to get a whole lot of it. My voice dropped an octave. Ever heard of impersonating a federal officer? Because your buddies just committed that on camera. He stammered something about just following orders, and turned to leave. But Morales' cruiser chose that moment to appear around the bend, lights flashing, no siren. The young man raised his hands slowly, the bolt cutters falling to the dirt. I watched his face pale as the cruiser door opened. Morales stepped out in full uniform, badge gleaming, shotgun holstered at his side, sunglasses reflecting everything. He looked at me, then at the young man. You call for backup? He asked, pretending it was a friendly chat. I smiled. Just 2 trespassers and a lookout. House is secured. Morales raised a brow. Anyone injured? I shook my head. Only their pride. The third man dropped to his knees, muttering apologies. Morales radioed for transport. And I finally took another sip of coffee, still warm. Maybe Sunday wasn't ruined after all. The sun was fully up by the time Morales and I sat on my porch, watching the 2 fake officers squirm behind the cruiser's backseat glass. The young lookout was seated on the curb, head in his hands, muttering fragments of apologies between shallow breaths. Morales had already called in the station to run background checks. We were both quiet for a minute, letting the breeze do the talking. Then Morales tilted his head at me. You sure you don't want to press charges for breaking and entering? I gave a short laugh and looked toward the busted door, the splintered frame still hanging awkwardly from its hinges. Oh, I'm pressing charges. I just want to know who wrote the script they were reading from. Morales scratched his jaw. You really think this was HOA business? I mean real HOA board involvement? I nodded slowly. These guys weren't winging it. They had an agenda, a plan, and confidence. Somebody told them I was a soft target. Somebody with influence. Morales reached into his front pocket and handed me a folded paper. You're not going to like this, he said. I unfolded it. A printed HOA violation notice. My name, address, and infractions listed in ridiculous detail. Unauthorized mailbox height. Improper lawn edging. 2 decorative flags instead of 1. And then, scribbled across the bottom in red ink, repeat violations must be escalated. My stomach turned. I held it up to the light, examining the signature. Randall Truss, the HOA president. Morales confirmed it with a nod. Truss is getting bold. There've been complaints. Low-level stuff. Fines. Threats. Even a few cameras installed without permission. I frowned. But now he's sending out muscle. Morales leaned back. You want to play this smart? I looked him dead in the eye. I want to hit back so hard this entire county hears it. We decided not to take the two thugs to the station right away. Instead, Morales kept them in the cruiser, letting them sweat while I made them tea through the open window just to mess with their heads. They watched me stir it with the same spatula I'd held earlier, and I think the taller one actually whimpered. Then we switched gears. Morales agreed to play dumb for the next few hours. No official arrests yet, no paperwork, just ongoing investigation. That gave me time to dig. I spent the next hour in my study, digging through HOA newsletters, public records, and a private online forum for local homeowners. Within 30 minutes, I found 3 separate accounts of shady HOA enforcement tactics. One woman said she received fines for having a wind chime. Another guy's fence was mysteriously repainted the wrong color, and then penalized for noncompliance. But the big one was a post from 6 weeks ago, an anonymous user claiming they'd been threatened by private officers after refusing to pay a $2,000 landscaping fee that never existed on paper. They described uniforms nearly identical to what the 2 men wore this morning. I screenshotted everything, sent it to Morales, and called in a favor from an old friend, Derek, a cybersecurity analyst who owed me a few from back in the day. He agreed to trace the HOA's internal emails if I could get him access. That meant one thing: I had to get inside the HOA clubhouse. I knew the place. Brick building near the town square. Supposed to be used for meetings and monthly gatherings, but rumor had it the board used it as a private hangout, wine fridge, poker table, the works. And now, apparently, a war room. I put on the uniform one of the arrested fakes had worn, a navy blue shirt, Velcro badge, clipboard under my arm, and drove my pickup down the back road toward the clubhouse. On the way, I stopped to pick up a small wireless camera disguised as a button. I clipped it near my collar and activated the feed. Derek confirmed it was live. Morales stayed on standby. When I pulled into the clubhouse driveway, the front gate was closed. I clicked the window down and buzzed in using the keypad. A voice crackled. "Name?" I answered, mimicking the voice of the goatee guy from earlier. "Officer Myers. Bringing in suspect report." There was a pause. Then a beep. The gate slid open. I drove in slowly, scanning the lot. Only one car, a black Lexus with vanity plates that said H.O.A.1. I parked beside it and stepped out, clipboard in hand. The front door wasn't locked. Inside, the room smelled like cheap air freshener and printer toner. Framed community photos lined the walls. One was crooked, and I instinctively straightened it, forgetting I was supposed to be playing a role. Past the lobby was a locked office door with a security keypad. I knelt down and checked for camera wires. None. Then I reached under the nearby doormat. Bingo. Spare key. Some things never change. The office was dimly lit, filled with 3 monitors, stacks of envelopes, a safe, and a desktop tower humming quietly. I slid the USB Derek had preloaded into the drive. It began copying automatically. While it worked, I rummaged through the mail. Half of it was sealed, addressed to board members. But one envelope was open. Inside was a printed bank transfer receipt, large sums moved from community dues accounts to a personal fund labeled HOA Operational Incentive. It was signed by Randall Truss. The copier chimed just as the front door creaked open. Voices. More than one. I froze, grabbing the USB and slipping behind the open file cabinet. 3 men entered the main room. One of them was Randall. I recognized him from a neighborhood meeting last year, overdressed, arrogant, always calling everyone neighbor, like it was a curse. He was speaking to 2 others. "It's fine. Morales can't prove anything. The guys we sent this morning have no names, no addresses. If they talk, they're on their own." The second man laughed. "What about the old guy? The SWAT one?" Randall waved it off. "He won't fight back. He's retired. Probably too old to handle it." My knuckles whitened on the edge of the cabinet. I had them. Voices, receipts, full video stream. But I needed more. I slid out of the room the second they moved into the break area, took a picture of the Lexus plate, and walked out the front door like I belonged there. No one noticed. Not yet. Back in my truck, Derek confirmed he'd received the files. Morales radioed in to say the sheriff had been briefed. I smiled as I backed out of the lot. These guys thought I was done. They thought sending rent-a-cops would scare me into compliance. But they didn't realize they just handed me the match, and I was about to light the whole crooked system on fire. The next morning started with an early knock at my door, and for once, it wasn't someone pretending to be a law enforcement officer. Morales stood there with 2 fresh uniforms behind him, all wearing the kind of look that said things were about to get interesting. I stepped outside with a thermos of black coffee and handed it to him. He didn't say thank you, just sipped and handed me a manila folder. Inside were printed stills from the clubhouse camera feed I'd captured, along with a few enhanced shots Derek pulled from the HOA's internal system. Morales nodded toward the photos. You were right. Randall's been funneling money for over a year. HOA funds going directly into his personal offshore account. Sheriff signed off on a search warrant this morning. We're hitting the clubhouse in 1 hour. You in? I didn't need to answer. I just turned back inside, grabbed the clipboard from yesterday, and the zip ties I'd pulled from the junk drawer. I wasn't coming as a witness. I was coming as insurance. We didn't roll up to the clubhouse like a raid team. We pulled in casual, unmarked trucks, jeans and flannel shirts, the kind of rural normalcy that doesn't scream badges. But the second Morales gave the signal, 4 units parked at each entrance, and the front team moved in fast. I stayed with Morales as we entered through the main lobby. Randall was there again, seated in the same leather chair from yesterday, wearing a smug grin like he still thought the whole thing was a misunderstanding. I handed him the printed photo of his bank transfer and the time-stamped audio transcript of his little speech about the old SWAT guy. His grin disappeared in inches. He stood slowly, hands spread, already beginning his performance. This is a mistake. That's not what it looks like. We were just auditing accounts. Morales cut him off. Randall trusts you are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, impersonation through proxy, and conspiracy to commit unlawful detainment. You have the right to remain silent. And you really should use it. The moment Randall was cuffed, the clubhouse erupted into motion. One of the board members tried to bolt through the back exit, only to be met by a female deputy who promptly dropped him to the floor with a clean shoulder check. Another man, probably the HOA treasurer, locked himself in the restroom. Morales rolled his eyes and kicked open the door like a father walking into a teenage tantrum. I stayed behind and started photographing every inch of the office. Morales let me. It wasn't just about charges anymore. It was about exposing every part of the scams so this couldn't happen again. We found files dating back 5 years. Fake bids for landscaping services, false repair costs for non-existent fences, and entire phantom charges billed to homeowners who never even lived in the neighborhood. One page had my name, circled in red, with the words, "Former Tactical, don't confront directly," scrawled next to it. I held the paper up to Morales. They knew who I was. They knew and still tried this. He nodded grimly. Power makes people stupid. I folded the paper and slipped it into my jacket. I wasn't keeping it as evidence. I was keeping it as a reminder. After the arrests were made, and after the clubhouse was sealed for evidence, Morales gave me a lift back home. The cruiser was quiet. We didn't talk much. There wasn't anything left to say. Everything had already been said, recorded, or zip-tied. When we pulled up to my place, the door was fixed, thanks to a local handyman Morales had called the night before. A small gesture, but I appreciated it. I got out of the car and started walking to the porch when I noticed something strange. My lawn had been mowed. Perfectly. Edges trimmed, clippings bagged, not a blade out of line. And in the middle of it, a single white flag on a stick planted in the ground. No words, just a crude drawing of a smiley face. I picked it up and shook my head. Someone has a sense of humor. The rest of the week moved fast. Randall's mugshot made the local paper. The HOA's emergency board resigned en masse. The sheriff appointed a temporary oversight committee while the county reviewed every HOA operating in the region. And as for the fake officers? Turns out 2 of them had priors. Fraud. Assault. One had even worked private security until his license was revoked. Morales told me they cut a deal, gave up Randall's off-books contacts in exchange for reduced charges. It wasn't justice, not completely, but it was closure. And in a way, it was more satisfying knowing they'd be remembered as the guys who got trapped in a fog machine by a barefoot man with a spatula. A few days later, I hosted a small gathering on my porch. Neighbors I hadn't seen in months showed up with casseroles and folding chairs. Some of them admitted they'd been afraid to speak up, that they thought the HOA had legal power. One man said he paid fines just to avoid confrontation. Another said he once got a letter threatening to remove his tree if it dropped leaves on the sidewalk again. We laughed. And then we started planning. A real HOA. Transparent. Accountable. Nothing fancy. Just fair. As the sun dipped low, Morales clinked a bottle of lemonade against my thermos and looked at me sideways. You ever thought about running it yourself? I snorted. I didn't retire to hold meetings about shrubbery. He smirked. Still, wouldn't mind knowing someone like you's keeping the snakes out of the grass. I didn't answer right away. I just looked out across the yard, freshly mowed, peaceful again. I could hear a couple kids laughing from the house across the way. Someone was grilling. There were no patrols. No fake badges. No loud threats or walkie-talkies. Just a quiet stretch of land that finally felt like home again. That night, as I stood alone on the porch finishing the last sip of coffee, I thought about how close it all came to going the wrong way. If I hadn't been calm, if I hadn't been trained, maybe those idiots would have gotten the upper hand. Maybe someone else in town wouldn't have been so lucky. But they messed with the wrong man. Not because I was angry, but because I had something better than anger. Experience. Patience. And just enough fight left to push back when it counted. I turned off the porch light and headed inside, smiling as I passed the living room shelf. The old badge still sat there, untouched, beside the broken sidearm and my retirement plaque. I paused and whispered, "Still got it." Then I closed the door.